Hey, this is Coach Garcia. So we're back with another test review. So this time we're looking at Linear 3 test review. Again, the way that you find these is always a review name plus Langham Creek. So Linear 3 test review Langham Creek is what you should have typed in. I'm Coach Garcia. If you ever need anything, I am in room 1708, for those of you that don't have me as a teacher. Other than that, we're just going to go ahead and dive in and look at the problems just like before. We'll get as many of them done as we can per video. Hopefully we don't have too many videos. Hopefully we can work some of these pretty quickly. Alright, so first thing, and it's kind of cut off, but it says that we need to go ahead and find slope. So finding slope off the table, we want to do delta y over delta x. So in order to solve something like this, we need to find delta, which means that we need to do these little carets off to the side. So for this first table, you should have three on each side. The way that we would do it, and I don't have any calculators on me, but what we would do is we would take the bottom number, subtract the top number, and that gives you, whether it's positive or negative, it gives you a number. So we would do -3 minus -5, again on your calculator. It would be something like that. You would hit equals, and you would get 2, right? So we would put a +2 out here. We would keep doing that. -1 minus -3, we would get +2. 1 minus -1, we would get +2. Again, just be and it would be 1 minus -1. All of these should give me 2. On this side, we would have 0 minus 6, or in other words, you can ask yourself, okay, 6 plus or minus what gives me 0? 6 minus 6 gives me 0. 0 plus or minus what gives me 6? That's going to be -6, and then same thing here, we're going to have -6. Right now, oops, and that should be a 2. Now, it doesn't really matter which one we choose, but what you have to understand is if I choose this 2, for example, I have to choose this -6 here. Right, we set it up as a fraction, so I always like to write delta y, delta x over here. Some people just like to write little fraction. Just make sure you have a little fraction set up. We would do we would do the 2 on the bottom because that's my x, right? X side over here. These are technically my delta x's. What I teach my kids, or what I do in my classes, we do what I call cheerleaders. Right, think about cheerleaders, the one with 2 feet, or in other words, the X, the one that has 2 feet on the ground, always needs to be on the bottom. So we have 2 on the bottom, and then we have that -6 up at the top. You would type that into your calculator into alpha y equals. So again, calculator, you would do this little thing. Type it in, -6 on top, 2 on the bottom, and your calculator would give you -3. So my slope here is going to be -3. Not -3x, just -3. Alright, now with this, there is an equation. The equation would be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Again, slope of a line. What I'll tell you guys is, anytime that you're given 2 points like this, you can also do this. X, y, take each point and just plug it in. So you can do -4 there, -4 there, right? That's my first point. My second point is 8, 0. And then I could do the exact same thing that I did over here. Again, all we're doing is just finding slope, so I can just keep doing that. This equation up here actually does the same thing as taking the deltas of both sides and then putting the y's on top, x's on the bottom. So all I'm doing here is bottom minus top, which is technically y2 minus y1. Bottom minus top gives me 12. 8 minus -4. And then this one, 0 minus -4, gives me positive 4. Right, we always do delta y over delta x, which means that my y value of 4 goes on top, my x value of 12 goes on the bottom. And just once again, I take that, I type it into my calculator. My calculator, after I do alpha y equals, should give me 1/3. We jump over here. Again, I can set this up the same way. In fact, I would encourage you guys to set this up as a table. It just makes it a little bit easier. -5, or you would do 9 minus -5. On this side, you would do 0 minus 7. 9 minus -5. gives me 14. This one's 0 minus 7 gives me negative 7. So I have a positive 14 and a negative 7. Same thing as before, delta y over delta x. So we have negative 7 on top. We have the 14 on the bottom. Same thing as before. I take this, I type it into my calculator. My calculator says negative 1/2. That's just finding slope. That should be the easiest, or one of the easiest things that we've gone over in class this year. Now we'll go over how to write equations. And it says solve the following equations so that they are in slope-intercept form. Remember that slope-intercept form, what that means is just y equals mx plus b. Right, so we want all of our equations to be in this form. Now the first one's easy. Again, I always like to underline the information that I'm given. I'm given a slope. My slope is 3. And I'm also given a y-intercept. My y-intercept's written a little weird, but my y-intercept is negative 1. Right, so if I'm using my equation y equals mx plus b, technically I already have my slope of 3, which goes in there, and my y-intercept of negative 1, which goes in there. Now that might throw some people off just because we're used to plugging in our points a little bit differently. I'm just going to go ahead and plug it in this way first, and then I'll show you guys why that works. In fact, let's go ahead and just plug this in the way that we're supposed to plug it in. So the way that I teach my kids is we plug in our slope in for m. Our point is always in the form xy. So this 0 is going to go in for x, and the negative 1 is going to go in for my y. As you notice, the only thing that we don't plug in for is going to be the b. That's actually what we're going to be solving for. Once we solve for that, we should be able to write our equation. Alright, so we get y, actually let me go ahead and change that. The equation that we get once we plug everything in, again, negative 1 goes in for y, so negative 1 equal to, my slope is 3, my x is 0, plus b. So I take this equation and I solve. Well, the first step to solve is always going to be to distribute, so 3 times 0 is going to give me 0. So I have 0 plus b equal to negative 1. Notice that I don't have any x's or any y's anymore. You should not have any x's. I know that we start with mx, but I plug something in for m and I plug something in for x, so I should not have any x's anywhere. My equation now reads negative 1 equal to 0 plus b. Technically, I don't need to have that 0 there. So technically, I just have negative 1 is equal to b. Right, so I can reverse the order of this. I can reverse the order of this and actually write b is equal to negative 1. Right, well here's the thing. Now I know what my b is equal to. I know what my slope is equal to, so I can actually write my equation y equals mx plus b. Right, I can write it as y equals my m and my b. I can plug both of those in. My m is 3. My b is negative 1, so we have 3x minus, should be a 1. And so that would be my equation. Y equals 3x minus 1. Again, you can always double check your work by taking this, typing it into your calculator under y equals, going to your table. On your table, on your calculator, you should find the point 0, negative 1, which was given to you at the very, very beginning. Alright, number 5. Number 5 is going to be set up the exact same way. I know it's set up to where you're given a slope and you're given a point, so you would want to use point slope form, which, let me find a formula chart. Point slope form. You would want to use this point slope form, y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. I, however, like to use slope-intercept form and just solve for the b. And I'll show you guys how to work that. I think it's a little bit easier, and students tend to make less mistakes. The way that we do it is we solve it. We actually solved it over here, but we'll just keep practicing doing it over here. Same thing as before. My slope is 2/3, which means that my m is 2/3. And then I have the point, negative 6, negative 2. This is my x value. This is my y value. So I set this up the same way. I use my equation y equals mx plus b. My m, or my slope, goes in for m. Negative 6 goes in for my x. And that negative 2 goes in for my y. Again, we should not plug anything to that b. My equation is then rewritten as negative 2 equal to 2/3. Instead of x, I have negative 6, so I put parentheses negative 6 plus b. Alright, so there's my equation. Again, after I plug everything where it needs to go. I can then from here solve. So to solve, it's 2 steps. You're going to multiply positive 2/3 times negative 6, which gives me negative 4. Everything else comes down, so the plus b that I never touched comes down. The negative 2 comes down, and we have that negative 2 equals negative 4 plus b. Well, if you remember, if you were in my class, our 2 steps were always to distribute and then to add or subtract whatever number we get down here. So since this is minus 4, we're just going to add 4 to both sides. Once we do that, this cancels, or this creates a 0 pair. Negative 2 plus 4 gives me 2. So we have 2 is equal to b. Again, I can reverse that, bring it up here. I have that b is equal to 2. And I also know that my slope is 2/3, so I can also say that m is equal to 2/3. So whenever I write my final equation, y equals mx plus b, I can plug in my m and I can plug in my b. And then we'll look at 16. 16, the hint says to find slope first. That goes back to what we did up here, which is finding slope. Again, the easiest thing I think to do is to just make a table, x, y, put in my first point, 5, negative 9, put in my second point. Again, just make sure that they're next to each other, right? This 5 and this negative 9 are next to each other, so I put them next to each other. Same thing with the 10 and the 12. I then find my changes. Negative 10 minus 5 gives me negative 15. And then negative 12 minus negative 9 gives me negative 3. I then do delta y over delta x, which gives me 3 over 15, or 1/5. Double check my math because I did this in my head. That's right. Okay, so my slope is 1/5. Once I find my slope, I can choose whichever point I want to use. Usually I advise that you guys use the 2 positive ones. I don't have any 2 positive ones, so I'm just going to use this one that has 1 positive, 1 negative. It doesn't matter. You could choose 10, negative 10, negative 12. You solve it the same way. Then we set up this problem using our slope and using that one of the points that we chose. So we do y equals mx plus b. Again, the point that I chose, I'm going to go ahead and write it over here, 5, negative 9. Sorry. So we have the 1/5, that's my m, or my slope, and then we have the 5, negative 9, that's my point. So again, that's x, y. So as we plug these in, the 1/5 goes in for my m, the 5 goes in for my x, and then the negative 9 goes in for my y. And pause if you need to. My new equation is negative 9 equal to 1/5 times my x is 5 plus b. Again, my steps to solve these should be to distribute. So we do 1/5 times 5, which gives me 1. Everything else comes down, so plus b comes down. Negative 9 comes down. And then I need to move whatever we get when we distribute, we need to move it to the other side. So we got a positive 1, so we need to subtract 1 from both sides. We get negative 10 equal to b. which again, I take that and I write my equation. My b was negative 10. That's going to go in for b. My slope was 1/5. That's going to go in for my m. So my new equation would be y equals 1/5 x minus 10. And again, you would check this by plugging it into your calculator, going to y equals, going to your table. Your table on your calculator should have these 2 points, 5, negative 9, and the point negative 10, negative 12. Both of those points should be on your table.